So, good afternoon and good evening, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. It's titled Understanding the Foreign Interference, Transparency, and Accountability Act. I'm Xiaobei Chen. I'm co-chair of Canada-China Focus. I'm located in Ottawa, the traditional and unceded territory of the Algonquin Nation. We are very privileged today to have Senator Yuen Pau Woo as our speaker. Senator Woo is the founder and the chair of Canadian United Against the Modern Exclusions, QAME, and an independent senator representing British Columbia. For many of us, Senator Woo is a politician and a leader to look up to. We admire Senator Woo for his sharp intellect, his conscientious concerns for Canada and its values, and his willingness to take public stand on important issues. Most recently, the exclusions, stigmatization experienced by Chinese Canadians as a result of demonizing China and also the portrayal of China's rise from a global South developing country to an economic superpower as dangerous to the world. And very notably, he has also taken a public stance to speak out about the genocide in Gaza. So we just feel, he's our hero. And we feel very privileged to have him here to share his thoughts about this act in this context of recent changes as well. Without any exaggeration, the Foreign Interference, Transparency and Accountability Act is a serious topic for Chinese Canadians and also for other Canadians. We must say that. While Prime Minister Carney's visit to China has been fruitful and is a positive step forward for the two countries' relations and for people in both countries, many are also worried whether this will provoke even more demonizing of China, even more, I quote, scare tactics to resist better relations with China, as Senator Woo wrote in the Hill Times recently. Today's agenda is as follows. Senator Woo will speak for about 30 minutes. At the end of his speech, I will pose some questions to get the dialogue started. Then we'll have about 20 minutes or so for open questions from the audience. With that said, Senator, I'll now turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Xiaopei, and special thanks to Canada-China Focus for organizing this webinar. Thank you to CCF also for your support to CUAME, Canadians United Against Modern Exclusion. We are a very new organization. I set it up in the spring of 2025. In part as a response to precisely this kind of legislation and the broader hysteria, if I can put it that way, around foreign interference and the rise in the use of national security as a way to stifle alternative views and to stigmatize Canadians who have views that may not conform to what is considered the mainstream. I see a lot of familiar faces in the on the Zoom. I see some new faces as well. It's very nice to have you all taking part tonight. I thank you for taking the time to do so. I have a deck. It has about 27 slides. It's quite long, so I'll try and go through it quickly because I only have half an hour, but I look forward to the discussion that follows. The Foreign Influence, Transparency and Accountability Act was part of a package of legislation under Bill C-70, which was passed and given royal assent on the 20th of June, 2024. Notably, that bill was debated in the House of Commons between May the 6th and June the 13th, that sounds like 5 weeks, but in effect, it was only about 3 weeks because there's a lot of downtime in the House of Commons. It came to the Senate on June the 13th after the House passed it, and we dealt with it in less than a week. And again, it's in fact not even 7 days because we really only had about 2 or 3 days of sittings, plus one very cursory afternoon of hearings in the National Security and Defense Committee. And my point here is that a bill of this significance should have been given a much longer period of time for scrutiny and discussion and possible amendments, but the Parliament chose not to do so. And to be fair, most MPs and most senators weren't bothered by it. They just let it go through quickly because everyone was in the grip of foreign interference, as I call it, hysteria. Nobody wanted to be seen as soft on foreign interference, and so it went through. Let me get right to the bill and what the registry means for Canadians. Let me clarify, first of all, that the registry is not yet in effect. The reason why we're having this discussion now is because the government has now come out with draft regulations pursuant to the bill. They have launched a consultation period which all of us are entitled to provide input into. The consultation period ends on February the 2nd. At the end of my deck, you will see the link to the consultation portal, and I invite all of you to submit your feedback before February the 2nd. What I'm going through today will essentially give you the guts of the consultation questions, and I hope you'll feel quite well equipped to respond. There are some key terms in the Act that we need to understand. One of the most important is the idea of an arrangement. Essentially, you have to register, or nobody needs to register unless you have an arrangement. And it is an arrangement under which, as you can see in the slide, a person undertakes to carry out under the direction of or in association with a foreign principal any of the following activities: communicating with a public office holder, communicating or disseminating by any means, including social media, information that is related to the political or governmental process, or thirdly, distributing money or items of value. So there are basically three triggers. There has to be an arrangement with a foreign principal. You have to be involved in a governmental or political process. And thirdly, you have to be under the direction of or in association with. If those three criteria are met, then you have to register. This is what the definition of a foreign principal is. Very important to note, it's not a government, not just a government. It could be an economic entity, so that means, it could mean any foreign entity, a private company or a joint venture or a trust company or an investment fund, a state-owned enterprise, a quasi-state-owned enterprise. It could be a foreign power or a state, a government, including, of course, subsidiary bodies of governments, crown corporations, statutory boards, state-owned or state-linked companies. So essentially, any foreign entity. A person is not just individuals. It does for sure include individuals, natural persons, but it also includes corporations, trusts, companies, etc., etc. Certainly NGOs. I would think charities as well, maybe even religious organizations, not spelled out, but I would be surprised if they are exempt. This one is important because it is the criteria around what it is that you do with a foreign principal that makes you liable for registration. And you can see here that it covers a very wide range of so-called political or governmental processes. And that's not just, for example, an election. That election is just a very narrow part of the definition. It also includes a nomination process, you see under F. It includes proceedings of the legislative body. In other words, the work I do. If you talk to me about any bill, that qualifies. It even includes the development of a legislative proposal, which is to say, an idea for legislation that may be early on in the development process. Indeed, any kind of decision that is made by a public office holder or government body. I think we can safely say that any public policy issue would be covered under the definition of political or governmental process. If you fit the criteria, the three triggers that I talked about, then you have two duties to fulfill. The first is the duty to provide information, and that has to be done within 14 days after the day on which you enter into the arrangement. And then you also have a duty to update the information on a regular basis, even if there is no change in the status of your so-called arrangement. I'll get into that a little more later in the slide. Let's back up a bit to look at what the government says is the purpose of the Act. You see from the slide that they are focusing on what they call transparency. They make a big emphasis on the idea that the registry is not intended to stigmatize anybody or to give the suggestion that being on the registry means you are a problem or that you are a bad person. That's what they say. They like to frame it as a way in which the government has visibility and the public has visibility on anyone who is acting on behalf of foreign principals. And the idea is that by doing so, it will strengthen national security. This, of course, is the justification that the government has put forward. I've already touched on this question of what kind of political or government processes are covered, but I want to stress in this slide that it covers not only the federal government, but also essentially all levels of government, provincial, territorial, and municipal, as well as First Nations, Métis, and Inuit. So this would cover, for example, if you were concerned about having bike lanes. This is an example I'll show you later, but if you wanted to lobby your city council to have bike lanes in your town or city or village, that would trigger registration if you also have an arrangement with a foreign principal. As I mentioned at the start, the government has now embarked on a consultation process that expires on February the 2nd. There are two parts to the consultation paper that they are looking for input on. The first is what's called the regulatory impact analysis statement, and the second is the regulations itself. The impact analysis statement is kind of a requirement now for all new regulations where the government has to do a cost-benefit analysis. They have to do a costing of what these regulations will mean for the budget. They have to do gender analysis and a number of other mandatory things. And they use the impact analysis as a way of kind of justifying the regulations that they come up with and why these regulations are consistent with the law that was passed. The regulations themselves, of course, are the regulations. They talk about the specifics of how the law is to be implemented. This is the statement that the government has made on as part of its regulatory impact assessment. I want to draw your attention to the second paragraph where they say, by making foreign influence activities more transparent, the regulations will strengthen national security by distinguishing between legitimate and transparent foreign influence and covert and non-transparent foreign influence. And then by extension, they believe that the regulations will allow our security and intelligence agencies to focus on activities that pose a greater threat to Canada's interests. Presumably what they mean is that if you register and you're transparent, you're okay. But if you don't register and somehow they get wind of the fact that you haven't registered, even though you are eligible, then our intelligence agencies can pay more attention to what you are doing. That begs many questions, including, for example, these two. Will registration, in fact, establish legitimacy, which the government says it will do, or will it foster suspicion? Because I'm almost certain that there will be people who use the registry not as a white list, to use the phrase, but as a black list. In other words, if they see that you are on the registry and you happen to have a foreign principal that's a country that they don't like, okay, or that they don't have alignment with, that can be used, I think, by some people, maybe even by our intelligence and law enforcement as a kind of a filter to increase their scrutiny of your activities. So I don't think we can take at face value that the registry is purely about transparency and dispelling suspicions or making things transparent. In the same way, one could ask the question whether a failure to register, an innocent failure, and we'll get into some examples of why it's a bit unclear as to who is to register, but could a failure to register be seen not just as a failure to comply with an administrative procedure, but as an indicator of, quote, activities that pose a greater threat to Canadian interests? And this, of course, will apply, I think, to many Canadians who may not think they need to register, but are in fact captured by the criteria. Will they be under more suspicion, in other words, as a result of their non-compliance? If you do register, you have to provide a long list of information. I won't go through it. You can see it in the consultation document. Again, to stress that it's not just individuals. We're talking about corporations, trusts, joint ventures, partnerships, funds, unincorporated associations or organizations, or any other legal entity, as well as individuals. I know many of you on this call, I know the groups that you are part of, whether it's benevolent associations or 什么会馆 or whatever clan association or cultural association, all of you are subject to registration, okay? If you meet the other criteria of having an arrangement with a foreign principal and you're involved in a governmental or a political process. So I ask some questions here that all of you should be thinking about. Does this mean if you are a member of Hong Kong Canada Business Association. I'm sure some of you may be members of the association. It's a very well-established group. What is their goal? Their goal is to promote more business, more trade between Hong Kong and Canada. It would be hard to argue that members of the association are not in association with a foreign principal, because HKCBA is supported by Hong Kong Trade and Development Council and gets support also from the Hong Kong Economic and Trade Office. So it would seem to me that the organization probably has to register, but do the members also have to register? Because they also share the objective of the foreign principle, which is to increase trade and so on. It's good for Hong Kong, but it's also good for Canada. Not clear. Secondly, you need to be aware that the targets of influence activities is not just public office holders. So it's not just people like me. Of course, if you talk to me or you talk to a senior civil servant or a city councillor, for sure it's covered. But even if you don't talk directly to me, but you have a WeChat group or a WhatsApp group that reaches a number of people, and you promote a public policy or a governmental or political process issue that is seen to be in association with a foreign principal, that would trigger registration as well. I would presume that giving a speech, at your Rotary Club or to your church group, or maybe even, and Xiaopei, I don't really know, but maybe even giving a lecture at university may well also qualify if you are talking about a governmental or a political process. I have questions about whether this would qualify in terms of talking to friends and relatives. As I say, social clubs. What about volunteer groups, religious organizations? A Buddhist priest talking about how he worries that the swastika will be banned, even though the swastika is a Buddhist symbol. Of course, it was abused by the Nazis. And maybe he does it because he has had consultations with the World Buddhist Federation, right? That's based in Taipei, as an example. Would that qualify? I think so, but not clear. So it's important to recognize that communication of and dissemination of information is sufficient to trigger the registration eligibility, and not just or not exclusively the direct communication with a public official. This is what I said earlier, but it's underscored in this slide. You need to disclose information on the process, the means by which the information is being disseminated, including, they say very specifically, social media, emails. Okay, so you send emails to a bunch of your friends, a mailing list. I think that would qualify. Text messages, etc., etc. And you have to provide in the registration process, names, URLs, and all of the things you see in that list. Now, the regulatory impact analysis does acknowledge, and I quote, racialized groups may experience suspicion or discrimination as a result of information posted in the public registry, particularly if certain countries appear more often than others. We know what they are talking about here, and I agree with them. We, particularly Chinese Canadians or those who register because of their so-called arrangements with China, may face suspicion, and those who do not register because they think they are not eligible may also experience suspicion, and discrimination. But here, this is a complicated issue. The government has said that the registry is country agnostic. That means it doesn't single out countries. Anyone or any person in the broad definition that meets the criteria for whatever country, for whatever principle of whichever foreign country will have to register. If that is truly the case, it is my belief, my expectation, that foreign principles of countries with long-standing political, business, and cultural ties with Canada will be much more heavily represented in the registry than foreign principles of countries from which Canadian immigrants have recently arrived. This is only logical. We have such a long and deep and profound relationship with the United States, for example. There must be tens of thousands of associations that Canadian entities, Canadian persons, broadly defined, have with American foreign principles. And one would expect that if the registry, if the commissioner follows the criteria strictly and fairly, we would see 10, 50 times more American registrations, or at least eligible registrations, than that from a country like China or India, or pick your developing country. But I will be very surprised if that happens. And that in itself, I think, will say a lot about how the registry is being implemented. But I keep an open mind for now. This is just an analytical point that I'd like to flag. The commissioner, or the regulatory statement, says that the commissioner will develop materials to mitigate potential stigma. That's very good. I don't know what they mean by it. We will wait and see. But my own view is that the best way to mitigate stigma is, first of all, to apply a very high threshold in defining the criteria, quote, at the direction of, and secondly, to have a very narrow interpretation of in association with. Non-compliance has its penalties. On the face of it, the penalties are not, I don't want to say not severe, but they're not criminal in nature. They are administrative. And you see here the violations that are considered non-compliance, failure to provide information, failure to update, etc., etc. Typically, the penalties are fines between $50 and $200,000, but the commissioner also has the means to impose criminal or to pursue criminal prosecution. How would non-compliance be detected? How would they know if you didn't register but should have? Well, they tell us. It would be through the assessment of information already provided in the submission. So you provided a submission and they feel like it's not accurate or not fully accurate. This one's important. They would also rely on what's called proactive disclosure from the public. That's basically snitching, right? It's your neighbors and your friends and your colleagues who, for noble or less noble reasons, decide to whisper to the commissioner that, my colleague who's in the next office, you better investigate her because she goes to country X every 6 months, and I'm pretty sure that she's got friends in the government, and she's concerned about trade issues with that country and wants to promote trade with the country. That's snitching. And you know that snitching will be taken more seriously by the commissioner or certainly by our intelligence agencies when it comes to some countries and not others. So we'll have to see how this plays out. Obviously, the commissioner can reject and not pay attention to so-called proactive disclosure, but it can be a very poisonous environment if the public takes it seriously and picks up on the call for snitching. You should also know that there's a very long list of government departments who have the right and the power to give your information to the commissioner if they know something about you or they think they know something about you. Maybe you have a grant from the Department of Natural Resources, and maybe the grant has to do with partnering with an Indian NGO working on water conservation. And then you come back here and you also advocate for water conservation. Environment Canada can provide your name to the commissioner as a tip to them. So I've already talked about these penalties. They are, on balance, the commissioner will likely go at the very low end of the penalties. That's my hope and my guess. The commissioner could also just issue warnings. So this may or may not be a serious threat to individuals. Right now, we can only hope for the best. However, there's a different kind of penalty that could be triggered by non-compliance. And this is not in the Foreign Interference and Transparency and Accountability Act. It's in a different act that was part of Bill C-70. You can read it for yourself here. Every person commits an indictable offense, blah, 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 because they're in association with a foreign entity, engages in surreptitious or deceptive conduct with the intent to influence a political or governmental process, etc., etc. So the language is very similar to the registry language, except this now operates under a different statute. It's the Foreign Interference and Security of Information statute. And the trigger in this case is that you are doing this political or governmental, you're in association with a foreign entity to engage in a political or governmental process surreptitiously or covertly, which begs the question, how would they know if you're doing it surreptitiously or covertly? And the answer, surely one of the answers is if you didn't register. So you could very innocently not have registered because you don't think you need to register. You could be campaigning for your city councillor, or not even campaigning, just handing out leaflets, something very innocent. You could have a connection with your alumni association in Korea because you're a loyal alumni, and maybe the riding in which this election takes place has a lot of Korean Canadians, so you feel a special ability to connect with them. You did not register. I can see a scenario where you are tagged as having covertly or surreptitiously sought to influence a government process. And here is the scary part. It's not an administrative penalty. It's not even a $200,000 fine. The potential penalty is life in prison. So let me get to a tool that we've developed with the help of Thomas McIntosh Chen, who I see is on the call as well. And Thomas, I invite you to jump in if you have any information to augment. But he has developed a really fabulous tool to help Canadians self-assess if they need to register. I won't go through it in detail, but I'll quickly just log on here. So am I a foreign agent? You click on Let's Go, and you go through the steps. Very simple. I think there are 3 or 4 steps. Are you involved in a political or governmental process? I'm just going to tick this one here. Oops, sorry. So next, which level of government are you working on? Let's say provincial. And there's some very nice explanations to help you figure out which category you fall into. Are you doing any of these activities? So I'm going to say you're just posting on social media. That's all you're doing. So next, is there a foreign principal? This one is key. So let's say it's a foreign NGO that you are in contact with. Next, do any exemptions apply? Are you working for a foreign government? Is this a part of an agreement with the government of Canada? So none of the exemptions apply. And bingo, you likely have an arrangement. You may need to register. So I invite you to go through the tool to see if you qualify. Now let me try and find my way back to the deck here. Yes. So I'm nearly at the end now. There's also some real world scenarios that Tom has come up with. Again, just very. Here we are, real world scenarios. And you'll probably be as astonished as I was. But Irish cultural education programs, British community advocacy on immigration, German academic research collaboration, blah, 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 Italian trade and business promotion, legal aid, arts festival, Chinese Canadian healthcare, American university, all of these are potentially, or on the face of it, all of these on the face of it require registration with the FITAA. That brings me, I think, to pretty much to the end now. There's a consultation process. This is the link. I can make this deck available to all of you later, but it's very easy to find the link, and I invite you to submit your comments. Let me just close by thanking all of you once again, but to stress that the registry is not up and running yet, and everything I said is an interpretation. Everything you see on the Court Ready website is for educational purpose. It's not legal advice. I mean, if you are really worried when the register is up and running and you need legal advice, you should see a lawyer. But I've given you my best effort in interpreting what I see in the regulations, and now I look forward to some discussion.
Thank you so much, Senator, for your analysis about the act and also the context that it emerges. As I was listening to you, that I feel that I think it's important to look at the technical side and definitely the obviously very broad definition of arrangements of peoples, of associations. I also feel that there is the unspoken premise behind the act, which is to decouple, right? To discourage contact between Canada and targeted countries. I know it says in the consultation part, it says country and agnostic, but I think we should keep in mind that when the U.S. signed the executive order to put Japanese Americans in concentration camps, that was country agnostic as well. And there was no question it was targeting Japanese, and in practice it was. But in the official paper, it's country agnostic. So I think it doesn't mean anything. I think what it needs, this act needs to be read in association with other statutes that have identified adversaries of Canada, right? And specifically China, Iran, Russia, Pakistan. These are the main ones. I think. I mean, on the one hand, I can't help just marvel at the hypocrisy of it, right? Because, as you said, how will it look like if all the Americans with association with that foreign entity registered, right? I think is it really governable as a problem? And what about Israel as well, right? As a foreign entity. So I think those are my thoughts. And the other, I just feel like so it's a tool to decouple, right, and to shut down contact in this case between China and Canada. And I just feel like it's so contradictory um, to um, to the prime minister's a discussion with the Chinese government and to build, to forge new strategic partnership and to encourage people to people civil society level contact. And how could all of that happen, right? With this act, about to be implemented. So I just thought I'll share those initial thoughts. I see that we have some hands up already. So
Will you moderate, Xiaopei?
yes, yeah.
Okay,
So
I'll
let's
let you call on.
yeah. Let's have Michelle and then Shishi.
Well, hello, folks. Can you hear me well? Excellent. I just wanted, I'm calling from Calgary, Blackfoot Territory, Mohkinstsis, and follow you on Blue Sky. So grateful to be able to register for this today. Thank you. Right now in Alberta, we're really fighting, I would argue, American entities, and that they are really interfering with our democracy. And I do feel there's a massive double standard here that this is targeting the Chinese community as opposed to a very direct threat, which is the Trump folks right now. And I'm just wondering, is that something that's being talked about at all in regards to this? And the reason why I bring it up is that we may have to have a referendum vote here in Alberta, and that is direct and foreign interference, but not by China. So I just wanted to know what your thoughts are and how we can maybe combat this, just kind of from outside of Alberta, broader thinking.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Michelle, for the question. We hope you don't leave, by the way. Please stay. Alberta, I mean. Um, you know, the law has passed, okay? There's nothing we can do about it. And Mr. Carney has inherited this law. So there is clearly a dissonance and disconnect between what he did the last few days and the strategic partnership and the warming relationship and all of that. There's a disconnect between his new effort to have a more normal and somewhat friendly relationship with China and everything that went on before he became prime minister from his own party. And there are still people within his party who are very hostile towards China, who said some really unfriendly things to China, who are now struggling to reconcile this new approach. Mr. Anand, for example, you probably saw she was asked by one of the media when she was in Beijing, previously you said China is the disruptive power. Do you still believe that? And she basically didn't give an answer. So the thing is that the registry is going to have to happen because it's the law. And I think the way for me to think about it is to while it has a lot of problems in terms of stigmatization and administrative bloat and kind of the uselessness of it all, I think it's important we make sure that it's done fairly, right? Across all spheres of foreign interference. And as I said in my presentation, common sense would tell us that if you did apply the criteria fairly, if you used the words in the legislation, if you apply them across different countries, one would expect that a country with which we have the deepest, longest, most profound economic and political relationship will have the most registrations, right? And if that doesn't happen, I'm gonna make that known. I'm gonna say something about it because it will demonstrate that this is clearly biased. We cannot stop the registry from happening. I can't stop it by myself. Maybe in a few years' time, this government or a future government and MPs and senators will realize that this is a colossal waste of time, or that it is a discriminatory instrument. And maybe at that time we can repeal the legislation. But for now, let's try and make sure it's used in a fair-minded and equitable way.
Tishy, go ahead.
Oh, yes, yes. Thank you, Senator, and thank you for organizing this conference. I have a question because I receive your self-testament, so I try to try to test it, and I said yes because we are working in the community and our role is to ask the government to change some procedures and to more help the more people possible, and also like we always talk with the deputies and all these kind of people. So if this law has been put out, and what can we do? And also like some of our program, they have a criteria to give us money, and one of the criteria is uh, they call the civil participation. That means you have to participate the politics, and in another way, the government have this law, and you have to be registered. And you know that our situation. I remember that the ICMP they said that last time, and if they have this law, they could sue us, and so I'm so afraid that this law is they will just focus on the several countries you mentioned. It's for me it's really like that the 100 years ago when the registration for the Chinese, they just change another form. And maybe, yeah, I know that the Chinese community is very exciting all over Canada, because right now the relationship between China and Canada seems getting better. But who knows, one day if this fell down, and the Cold War between two countries, and all the Chinese people, I see that if it's like that, like all the community leaders in Montreal, they have to all the associations have to be registered. Otherwise, I don't know how many people will be in the prison. So it's really scary. Yeah, that's my comments. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, the fact that the law is written badly and that there are penalties that can be very severe does not mean that that the government will enforce those laws. That doesn't make it any better. But I like to think that there will be some common sense so that the government won't implement the law so narrowly and so rigidly that it puts a lot of people in jail or at jeopardy of their careers and so on. But even if one person gets hurt, that's enough. That's bad enough, right? And ultimately, if it's a bad law, we have to call it a bad law and we have to fix it. Now, in your situation, I don't know what you ticked in the self-assessment tool when it came to the foreign principle. I don't know what you consider to be a foreign principle, but it could be that you attend events where the Chinese consulate general is present, right? And they support the work of your organization because you help Huaqiao, Chinese people, okay? And whether you think that qualifies as in association with or not, the question is whether the commissioner thinks that to be the case. If the commissioner feels that you are in association with the Chinese government because you take part in consulate organized events and you consult with them on how to help Chinese Canadians, if they consider you to be in association with, then they will want you to register. And if you don't register, then you will be subject to the penalties. My advice to Canadians who feel that there's a risk, or let me put it this way, if you are involved in any political or governmental process, like an election or the ones I described, it's safer to register than not register, because if you don't register and they go after you through the Security of Information Act, the penalties are very severe. The other option is don't get involved in civic activities in this country, which is ridiculous. And sometimes I feel like the whole point of this law is to discourage immigrants from taking part in Canada's civic life. Because why would I run the risk of life imprisonment to help my city councillor hand out leaflets? Why would I run the risk of doing that? I'd rather just make money and have a quiet life. So it's a very tough situation.
I just want to follow up on that question and also Senator Wu's response. I do feel that I'm very concerned about the impact on the civil and the political participation of Chinese Canadians, even before this act, because I did a survey which was partly sponsored by Senator Wu's office and the CCF and Carleton University, which has one of the findings is that 30% of Chinese Canadians out of a random sample, which means likely it's generalizable to Chinese Canadians in general. About a third of us do not feel comfortable speaking about Canada-China relations. That is it's not something you can report to the police, right? It's not a fist, it's not a punch, it's not a shove. It's but it really affects our civil rights, and I think the act, if implement, it will implement, and it will be a de facto disenfranchisement of Chinese Canadians again, right? So I think that is unfortunate and harmful echo from the past.
Agreed.
Henry, are you raising your hand? No.
You need to unmute.
Henry cannot hear you.
I can't hear you.
Still
You
cannot
need
hear you.
unmute first. Unmute first.
Yes, so maybe when Henry is trying to unmute, I'll read out a comment from Frank. For information to books out in 2025 drives a certain narrative. One is Dennis Molinaro's under assault, interference, and espionage in China's secret war against the Canada, perhaps, and the other is the beaver and the dragon. So I haven't read these two books, but I think it is. There are many pundits who are pushing this narrative. So, Henry, have you been able to unmute? I guess no.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, good. Yes, Henry,
Okay,
go ahead.
okay. All right. I wear many hats. Yeah? I'm the chairman of the Malaysian Association, the advisor to the Canadian Multicultural Council, where we have 20 Asian communities under one umbrella. Okay. The way, from what I hear from you, it looks as if, we have about 180 communities in Canada easily, right? So each of us have a association, right? And all of us are tied to either our embassy or our home country, some connection, So the way you sound, almost all of us have to register them. Every community association, whether it be Tibetan Association, Malaysian, Indonesian, Philippine, and Philippines has about 300 associations here. Chinese has about 3,000 at least. So it's going to be a nightmare for the administration, And I don't know how they're going to deal with that. I mean, theory is easy, but to execute this is very difficult. And by the way, I'm not sure how Australia, UK, they also have the same thing, I think, foreign interference. Like, how is it different, from us?
Well, Henry, certainly being part of a bilateral cultural or business or sporting organization which involves the counterpart government or governmental entity meets the definition. In my opinion, it meets the definition of foreign principle. The question, so you are in association. I think that test has been met. But the question is whether you are involved in a political or governmental process. So if the only thing you do is play badminton, for example, I think you're okay, all right? Or you play mahjong is okay. I think that's all right. But if you then want to talk to your MP, okay, about having health materials in the community translated into Bahasa Malaysia so that it's easier for, people who only speak Malay to understand the materials, then you are touching on a governmental or political process. Or if you say, oh, why don't we have a free trade agreement with Malaysia? We have a free trade agreement with so many other countries. I really think we should do it. Again, it strikes me that you will have triggered the political or governmental process.
Because
this is not legal advice, all right?
I know.
Now, it's possible that the commissioner will, in his or her first few months, maybe will produce a long list of exemptions or non-eligible activities, okay? But the list could be very, very long indeed. And then if it's a really, really long list, then it begs the question as to why have a registry in the first place. It's just badly designed in the first instance.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Yeah, because we're here supposed to promote people-to-people relationship, exchange of culture. You have to be involved. Like Malaysian Association, we have to involve in promoting Malaysian trade and investment. Yeah, so that is, you're already touching on that easy. Yeah, so it's up to them whether they want to charge me or not. I mean, they could
I mean, the fact that you're promoting trade is clearly involvement in the political governmental process. I guess one could say, well, are you really in association with? And here's the problem. It's the words, right? The law, unfortunately, says that the definition of arrangement is at the direction of or in association with. Now, I tried to remove those words in the Senate. I moved an amendment. Unfortunately, my colleagues didn't agree with me, so my amendment was defeated. The Australian legislation, since you asked the question, does not use the phrase in association with. So I think it allows for a narrower scope of eligible registrants. But the fact that Canada chose the language in association with, I think, could open up the definition to a much wider range of entities and individuals.
Are you saying there's an Australian law like this?
Yeah.
Yes, there is.
UK.
It's called FITS, FITS, Foreign Influence Transparency Scheme. Canada modeled a lot of this legislation, the FITAA, on the Australian scheme, but I noticed that the Australian definition of arrangements is tighter than our definition.
Okay. Hi, Pei. Do you have another question to ask, or did you ask your question already?
I guess just in general, I guess I can provide a little bit a different perspective. I'm from the U.S. U.S. what we have is called FARA, Foreign Agent Registration Act, which was passed in 1938, which was to counteract the German influence before the Second World War, when the United States, at least 1/3 of them, are of German descent. In the last few years, in the U.S., U.S. government have used the FARA law to prosecute probably 6 or 7 Chinese Americans. Again, I'm just roughly tell a general picture. Half of them are acquitted, and 2 of them are going to be on trial in the next two months. And I also predict 1 or 2 of them are going to be acquitted because they are in a really weak legal position. Yes, I do very much agree with the senator on. I don't have a chance to really read it very carefully. I will do that. But words like arrangement, words like in association with, are so loose. I think this law is worse than the U.S. FARA law. That's just my general comment. Yeah. Now, I want to give an example. If I'm in Vancouver, if I'm on Chinese Consul General's invitee list for Lunar New Year, from National Day, and at the same time, I'm interested in my local municipal issues. I trying to be a good citizen, trying to help somebody's campaign win a council seat or mayor. Is that kind of qualify me as to register?
Well, I can't give you a definitive answer. Frankly, I don't think so. And I suspect the commissioner will also say that doesn't qualify. You simply accepted an invitation to go to a reception, right? Assuming that's what you mean. Chinese New Year, the Consul General hosts a big party. You are one of 300 people. I think probably that will be okay. But there is an example that's given in the consultation document before the bill was tabled that talks about how an academic has a meeting with a foreign diplomat, and then after the meeting publishes an op-ed that supports that country's position on a particular issue. Now, that example was cited as a registrable activity. Well, they call it malign foreign influence. Mm-hmm. So they assume that by having the meeting with the consul general, or the diplomat, shall I say, by having the meeting and then subsequently publishing an article that is consistent with the position of that country, shows that you are in association with. To me, it's very, very dangerous, because it basically means that they are using your views as a proxy for determining whether you're in association with.
Right. With U.S. FARA law, what we have, which is a little bit better than yours, is U.S. fire law has quite a few exemptions. Have very clearly listed some of those exemptions, like scientific, academic, religious, and the purely trade issues. So
no exemptions.
yeah, so you don't have any exemption, right? So
No exemptions.
and it's too late to put any amendment on that, right?
Not in the law. The commissioner could well exempt some of that, but I think if he or she were to do that, there would be a backlash.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we are running behind. Past the scheduled time already. So I'm going to use my chair's privilege. I'm going to allow two more questions. One from Midori, and the last one I would like to have Liam Hoselton to ask a question or to share some comments. That's my using my privilege because I know Liam is doing some research about foreign interference concerns in New Zealand, Australia, and Canada, and its impact on Chinese diaspora in these countries. And he's also recruiting people for interviews. So Liam, you can also say a bit about your research and see whether people would be interested in joining your research. But first, let's hear from Midori, and then we'll end with a comment or question from Liam.
Thank you, Xiaobei. Thank you very much, Senator Wu, for educating us. I really appreciate your interpretation and all the insights about the law. I know my question is about the relation between the Foreign Interference and Security Information Act and this time the bill. Why they needed to separate the bills, the government have to create the new law this year. I mean, very soon it will be passed. But how they are related to each other, and then why they needed to build the extra system on the previous one.
Yes, that's a good question. The Security of Information Act is a long-standing piece of law that was updated in Bill C-70, and the name was changed to include foreign interference. So now it's called the Foreign Interference and Security of Information Act. And they made the amendments to take into account what they felt was a type of foreign interference that the previous law was unable to account for, to take care of. And what they're referring to is the whole idea of shadowy agents or proxies, people who aren't outright spies, but who are acting on behalf of or in association with a foreign power. It all comes from the Chinese spy hysteria, you know. CSIS has this idea that Canada is full of Chinese proxy agents who are not overtly part of a Chinese state security, but who somehow have some sort of secret code with the Chinese government and they can do things on behalf of them. This is the prevailing view of CSIS, okay? And they persuaded the government to make these amendments to capture this problem that they identified. The registry, on the other hand, is brand new legislation. There never was a registry before. And because of public demand and because of, again, hysteria, the government came up with a registry because they thought the public wanted to have a registry. The way in which the two came together, and here I am making the interpretation, not the government, I don't think the government has fully thought through the fact that failure to register under the registry could be used as the test for covert and surreptitious activities under the Security of Information and Foreign Interference Law, on which much more severe penalties apply. I don't think they've actually made that connection. I've made the connection. I may be wrong. I'm not a lawyer, but I ask myself, if they were to say that you were acting covertly and surreptitiously because you got involved in, Victoria's municipal election, how would they prove that you were doing it covertly and surreptitiously? Well, they would say you didn't register.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So I can see that Security of Information Act was there, but no, they use this opportunity to make the Security of Information the framework of the data sharing, and then also
Yes, there were other things in the Security of Information Act. This is just one part of it. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, Liam, are you with us?
Hi, Xiaobei. Thank you, Senator Wu. Really appreciate the talk. Very interesting and important topic for many of us. Yeah. So, hi, everybody. My name is Liam Hazelton. I'm a PhD candidate. I'm doing research on the effects of national security responses to foreign interference on the Chinese diaspora and also security professionals in New Zealand, Australia, and Canada, as Xiaobei mentioned. I was just posting comments that the way that the FITAA is kind of framed within the public consultation, at least, is that it's incorporating best practices internationally. I'm quite skeptical of this. For one, there has never been actually a peer-reviewed study that has actually demonstrated the efficacy or effectiveness of these measures. There's actually more peer-reviewed studies that have been suggesting that they infringe on people's rights and freedoms, mainly the freedom of association and freedom of expression. And this is something that has been seen in Australia with the FITAA Act. Also, most recently, there was the American Bar Association a few years ago put out recommendations for renewing the FARA Act and recommending that there's the removal of language like foreign agents and foreign principals from that due to potential stigmatization. These are all very kind of concerning things that I think do need to be addressed. Just blatantly the framing of foreignness as what this study, or sorry, what this scheme is trying to manage is concerning. So I don't really have that many questions other than how is this enforceable? Because to me, it would seem that somebody in Ontario who's potentially working for McDonald's in association with a foreign principal, as the law states, going to Service Ontario to get their license renewed, is interacting with a public office holder in a political process, governmental process, doing some kind of influence by talking to them about their day, getting increased likelihood that they'll get their driver's license improved. I think that then they might have to register underneath the way the scheme is currently worded. This isn't to say that I don't think that there necessarily should be a scheme or anything like that. I just think that it needs a lot of work going forward if it is actually going to be implemented in a way that's effective and would minimize harm to everyday Canadians.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Liam. Before I answer the question, do you intend to make a submission to the consultation process?
Most likely, yeah.
Good,
It's on my
good.
to-do list. Yeah.
I hope you do, and you bring a particular expertise. I see that you've posted the link to the New Zealand impact statement. That's really helpful. If you have other links to share, particularly on the comments you made about the problematic language that's been found in other reviews or studies, I'd be very grateful to see those references.
Yep.
I don't know if the McDonald's example, requires registration or not. I mean, the government could well say that a governmental process does not include any kind of licensing of everyday activities. I mean, there could be some wording they come up with. But the broader point is that there will be a lot of questions around what may appear to be everyday policy questions that citizens have concerns about, and whether they would be captured under the definition. And so we really won't know until the commission and the registry is up in place. And if in fact innocent people are caught up because they failed to register innocently in good faith, the only way in which this can be remedied will be through the courts. And it's going to take a long time. People are going to get hurt, maybe very badly hurt as well. And a much larger community could well be stigmatized or penalized because of the costs of being involved in civic or public policy activities. So there are a lot of challenges in the months ahead. The good news, it's not that great news, but there is a mandatory review of the bill in 5 years. So that would be 2029, because we passed the bill in 24. And at that time, Parliament can, say whatever it wants to say, include proposed changes and repeal or whatever. But that's a long time away.
Thank you so much, Senator, for your education today, and for the wonderful comments and the questions as well. So I would encourage everyone to give attention to this serious issue, and take actions that you think would be appropriate, including make submissions to the about this act. So with that said, I will say good night. And I also want to encourage people to sign up for CCF's newsletter. Georgia has posted the link there, very helpful. And last but certainly not least, many thanks to Georgia for organizing this event for us. Without her help, we would not be here having this wonderful discussion. Thank you, Georgia.
Thank you, Georgia. Thank you also to my colleague, Thomas Liu. Thank you to Tom McIntosh Chen for the courtready.ca website. I invite all of you to check out the courtready self-assessment tool and to spread the word. I want other Canadians to know that this is coming up.
And a final word. Thanks to my co-chair, John Price, as well, who cannot be here today, but his work really has paved the way for this webinar. So thank you so much, and good night.
Good night, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.